Welcome to the Pressrow. Behind-the-scenes stories from the world of sports media. Pressrow. Insight and interviews from around the sports world. Now here's your host, Jonah Siegel.
Welcome back in the Pressrow. Jonah Siegel here in Seattle. It is just following a Grateful Dead or Dead and Company weekend. As you know, I was out in Colorado this past weekend. Unbelievable experience. They say this is it. I don't believe it. But I got to see the band 2 out of 3 nights. Dave Matthews finished with them. It's an incredible experience. They have 5 more shows. You have a chance to get out there before listening to this. Definitely do it, but I don't believe this is the end.
Yeah, Jonah, I saw their farewell concert about 5 years ago. It was great.
Know, right?
Yeah.
Dead and Company or Grateful Dead? We're going to have a conversation before I introduce you. Was it Dead and Company or was it somebody else?
Oh, it was Dead and Company. Yeah.
So that voice you hear is John Ourand from the Sports Business Journal. We are delighted to have you. John, how are you this morning?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we can talk Dead now. I just saw them. I saw them last year in Boulder, at Folsom Field. My son, who produces this fine show, is a student at Boulder. He called me up about 18 months ago. He said, "Dad, will you take me to see the Dead in Boulder?" I'm like, "Yep, absolutely." We had so much fun last year because will you take me again this year? We saw the first show and the third show, which was the last. And then as they were getting ready to wrap up the show, John Mayer announces, a good friend of the band is going to play with us for the last song. Please welcome Dave Matthews to the stage. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I was trying to explain to my 21-year-old son, John, maybe you can help me here, what that is like. And the only thing I could say to him, because he didn't get it, was I was like, imagine going to see LL Cool J in concert and Drake popped up to do the finale with him.
I took my 24-year-old son to see The Who. They came through DC.
Right.
And that it was the same sort of conversation I was having. Like, believe me, back in the day, this song, it was still fun. They were better than I expected, but it was the same sort of premise there.
All right, so I'll ask you a question then, because you're obviously a music fan. Do you think that there's a rumbling out there that this really isn't it for Dead and Company? There's rumblings out there all over the interweb that Al Gore invented that John Mayer is going to keep this going, that this really isn't the end. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I think it's a great thing. Why end it?
Thank you.
When you go to the shows, it's, I know people after Jerry died didn't want to go and support any of the bands that came after that. What came right after? It wasn't Dead and Company.
No, it wasn't. There was another name. I think it was.
I forget what it was.
There was a funny name.
But when you went to the concerts, they pack stadiums. It's the atmosphere is fun. I would hate to see it end, and I don't suspect that it will.
It's the happiest place on earth next to Disneyland, and the only difference is there's nobody disgruntled at these shows, right? Like, people just go and have a good time, and people are friendly and they're happy and they're nice, and yeah, they might be a little bit inebriated or a lot of it inebriated, but who cares, right? And if you don't want to go, don't go. But we were at Boulder 3 nights, 120,000 people went through there.
Mm-hmm.
It was good fun. Anyways, that's not why we're here. It is a Major League Baseball All-Star Game weekend here in Seattle. It is going to be a hot mess. Not going down there, I hope. Anyways, that's not what we're going to talk about. He is John. He is the sports business media guru. We are very excited to have you. I was thinking about it on my drive back from the airport this morning. I'm not sure, John, there has been a more interesting time to talk about sports media and the business of sports media than literally right now. There is so much going on. You have, the Diamond Sports fiasco. You have ESPN letting people go at a time where the NHL draft had good ratings. The NBA draft had good ratings. The NBA deal is now in TikTok mode. That's coming up. The NHL deal is winding down in Canada. Amazon, Apple, all that's going on, YouTube taking over for DirecTV, the whole college football changes going on there. Like there is so much going on. I'm sure I've left off 10 or 12 things in addition to that. Like, can you think of a more tumultuous or interesting time in sports media in your lifetime?
Yeah, I can. And that was when I first started with Sports Business Journal. It was back in 2006. And my background is I did a lot of cable television trades here in the States. I was the editor of Cable World magazine, and I wrote for Cable Fax Daily, FAX, Cable Fax. And it was a tip sheet that we would put out every day, fax to people. And when I started at Sports Business Journal, that was the era of Dick Ebersol at NBC and David Hill at Fox, and it was these big broadcast executives, and they were totally dismissive at the time of ESPN and of really all cable. They're, why would they didn't believe at that point that any league would give its rights to an ESPN, because ESPN wouldn't love them like the broadcasters do, couldn't take care of them, didn't have the reach that the broadcasters have. And having come from cable, I understood sort of how big ESPN was. So it was a great point for me to make that jump over to Sports Business Journal, because I had utter clarity on what was going to happen, and it happened. ESPN came in, and the college football playoff, which at the time was called the BCS, ESPN outbid Fox by $1 billion. And it's because ESPN had the dual revenue streams. They were paid by cable and satellite companies, and they got advertising dollars. And Fox at that time only got advertising dollars. And you're like, wait, what is this? And we're now at a similar inflection point. And unfortunately, I have no clue right now, which makes it a little bit more chaotic. To answer your question, it's not even a trend anymore. It's happening. It's unmistakable that the video world is going towards streaming. The rise of Netflix, Apple TV Plus, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. That's absolutely happening. And you have these big media companies holding on. The only reason they exist now is for live events and live sports. And so they're holding on desperately to these live sports. And you have these deep pocketed streaming companies, Apple, Amazon, like Netflix, that are starting to pick a couple of these leagues and a couple of these rights. At some point, though, like these deep pocketed companies, they're public companies, and they're for-profit companies. And so at some point they have to like do deals that actually make financial sense for them. They can't, not everything can be a loss leader for them. And so, entertainment already has gone to streaming. I don't know anybody that sits down and makes a point to watch a television serial on broadcast or cable television. You go and you binge it on a streaming service. Sports, it's live. That hasn't quite happened yet, and it would be easy to just take a look and say like Apple's bigger than Disney, so Apple's gonna be the winner. But I'm not certain that's going to be the case this time. It's a totally fascinating time. Then you have cost cutting that's hitting all the traditional media companies, and everything is kind of it just is like a wildfire right now. And trying to document sort of where we are and where things are heading is proving to be much more difficult than I could have expected.
And at the same time, there's this thing you may have heard of called gambling, which is now legal. And that obviously plays an element as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, but what makes it tricky though is it's legal in a lot of big markets and big states, but it's a state by state a rollout. So if you're if you're Fox or CBS or ESPN, you have to tread somewhat carefully on that, because it's not legal in half the population that you're actually broadcasting to.
So let's go. Here's my question at the most basic fact, and that is the sports appetite has not declined. You still have a massive amount of people that are hungry for sports content. They want to watch games. They want to listen and I'm not saying radio, I'm just saying they want to listen to people talking about the games and banter in between games, and they want to watch highlights. Let's ignore for 1 minute the vehicles and the channels, if you will. But that appetite is it's still there, and it's probably growing. Would you not agree?
I'm so glad you say that, because there are a lot of people that would not agree with you at all, and they would take a look at Gen Z, like your son, and I have my 3 kids are firmly in Gen Z, so I have a focus group of 3 there that help out, and I'll use my son as an example. He is as big of a sports fan as I am, totally. He just consumes it differently.
Correct.
Trying to get these leagues, trying to figure out how to get your 21-year-old and my 24-year-old to actually pay for what they're interested in
that's a different question. But can we just agree that on an audience basis, the appetite remains significant? It has not decreased. Nobody is
but
saying...
I will say, I do believe that, Jonah, that you and I are in the minority in believing that. I think that a lot of people believe that, and I've seen some headlines. I don't know if we're in the minority. I think that there's a big section of people that believe that the younger generations are not interested in sports, and I rabidly disagree with that.
I fundamentally believe that the younger generation have zero interest in the methodology that you and I and other generations used to.
Mm-hmm.
They have no interest in, with all due respect, the Chris Berman highlight shows and the Sports Center shows, when they can watch it on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and others, and consume it in ADD, ADHD methodology, and they get it instantly. There is no need for that.
Yeah, and forget about the Chris Berman highlight shows, which of course you're totally right on that. Sitting down for a 2-hour NBA game, my son is satisfied following that on Twitter. He doesn't need to sit down and have it happen. And if he sees that great dunk 5 minutes after I did live, it doesn't matter. He has a highlight right there on his social media account.
Unless it's his team and it fits within his schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? So
yes.
So I don't care about the noisemakers. Listen, attendance for the most part up. Eyeballs are up. People want to watch and people want to consume. We can call, that's why I said listening. So do I believe that sports radio, as we used to call it, is a booming, growing business? No, of course not.
It should be, though. Come on. That's great entertainment.
No, but at the end of the day, people are, so I can't speak to the DC area. Here in Seattle, traffic is back to pre-COVID levels. People are stuck in their cars. Now, do they want to sit and listen to the old terrestrial radio? No. Why? Because they're now preconditioned to being able to find what they want to listen to, when they want to listen to it, how they want to listen to it. So if you're not smart enough to break down your shows into segments that people can listen to, hey, John's on from 3:15 to 3:30, and I can listen to the snippet where he talks about gambling on the All-Star game. And when he talks about boxing, I don't want to listen to boxing. I can tune out. I'm not going to listen to the hour show today. We've moved on from that. So the smart people get it. Papers, same thing, right? If you can't break it down into small digestible bites for today's audience, you've missed that boat. But at the core, the appetite for sports as a medium has not gone anywhere. People, the dummies who run these businesses just haven't figured out how to monetize it to meet the new generation. Is that in essence what the issue is?
I go to, that's totally the issue. I go to games, like when you go to a Mariners game, everybody talks about how old the baseball audience is. I go to a weeknight game, it doesn't look old to me at all.
It's not.
In fact, I feel old there.
Baseball games, in my opinion, are the best place to go to get away for a couple of hours and actually turn off. You can sit outside, you can talk to a buddy, I don't drink beer, but you can have a beer, a hot dog or whatever. It's outside. It's beautiful. The game is almost secondary, and you can just relax and talk to somebody and have a good night. That's my opinion on baseball. But so if you had to, so we've got this problem where you've got a massive appetite, and yet you have a disconnect as to how we are going to fill the appetite, correct? I mean, that's in essence what's going on, because we used to get our games through, originally it was through national networks, right? Now then we had these awesome things called regional sports networks. Then they have now blown up. Why did they blow up? Why are we in this diamond conundrum?
Okay, so I want to say something in defense of regional sports networks.
Okay.
I don't. Again, my head is not in the sand. You plainly see the move to streaming. However, the problem with regional sports networks, to me, is unique to Sinclair / Diamond Sports.
Okay.
And it's unique to your market, where the Root Sports was owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, which if you were to go to David Zaslav, who runs Warner Brothers Discovery, and give him a priority list, RSNs were, pretty far down on that list.
If they were on it at all.
If they were on it at all, exactly. And so these were two companies that totally mismanaged the RSN business and the regional sports network business. The regional sports network business for NBC is profitable, not as profitable as it used to be. Again, my head's not in the sand. You see where the trend lines are going, but they're still profitable. Yes Network. You think the Yankees want to get rid of Yes Network? The Nesson in Boston with the Red Sox, the Dodgers Network down in Los Angeles. All of these are relatively healthy regional sports networks. So the idea that the owner of the biggest regional sports networks is in bankruptcy, I think they have 19 RSNs over there. That isn't necessarily indicative of the overall business as it is Sinclair and the way that Sinclair managed those. That being said, why are we in this problem? There's cord cutting. The RSNs were such a great business for such a long time. If you were a sports fan, I do this thing. I live in DC, and I walk down the street, and I look in the windows and see what I can see. When TVs are on, nobody else is watching the Nationals or the Orioles, and there are probably 10 TVs on. So I'm having, but I am. So that, 10% of the viewership is with me, but 90%, 100% of everybody is paying for those channels, and that enabled the rights to go up, and I was able to see every game, and it was perfect. Well, a lot of those people that don't like sports have already migrated and cut the cord, and now they're just streaming Netflix and getting a cheap broadcast package or something along those lines. If you're a hardcore sports fan, you're still sort of hanging on to it. So that is a problem that is affecting NBC, and it's affecting some of these independents, but they're managing it a lot better than Sinclair was, or than Warner Brothers Discovery was.
So we now see a pivot where teams are bringing it in-house. Is that right? Is that the answer? So
they don't have the answer yet. This is sort of goes back to the way I answered your first question. Nobody knows how to move forward with this, because everybody thinks it's pretty easy to say, oh, well, look at the rise of Netflix. Let's just take everything streaming. Well, there's no way that streaming is going to bring in the same amount of revenue for these teams as the RSNs we're paying for. Especially if you look, I'm an Orioles fan, so I would pay to stream every single game this year. 2 years ago, when they were losing 120 games, zero chance. I don't need to pay for that.
Right.
Or even like if for some reason they lose like 20 games in a row and are out of the playoff race, I'm ditching out so. But with the RSN, I had to pay year round because I'm part of the sort of the cable ecosystem over there. So it's there's no set way forward, but all of the teams and all of the leagues know that whatever way forward means less revenue from their local media rights than they have been getting. And why that matters is not only paying the players, what they get, but also paying the assistant director of marketing and and your staff, and so sort of any of the back office costs, get affected by that.
So you and I look like we're roughly the same age. I went to college at the University of Vermont, and I used to play the long distance carrier game. So one month you were with AT&T, and then you would call MCI and you would say, "Hey, MCI, I'm a loyal customer of AT&T. Will you pay me to switch?" And they'd say, "Yes, we would." And then the next month you would call somebody else, Sprint, and then you would switch. And you would play the long distance game because I was calling friends in Detroit and I was calling friends in Toronto. And month by month, my long distance bill would go from $100 to $80 to $60. And all of a sudden there's free long distance. Eventually, that's what cable's just going to go away. And we're going to have these monstrous internet bills. And it's all just going to be about, look, the end of the day, that's what cable is now anyways. It's coming over a fiber line anyways. And it's a fancy word for internet access anyways, right? Like if my internet goes down, my cable goes down because it's coming across the same pipe here from Xfinity. So eventually, I don't care again, I don't really care about labels all that much because they're all getting very confusing. But eventually, isn't that really what this is going to be about, is the ability to watch this streaming, watch it, what channel it's going to be. But it seems to me that, and in Canada, we have this a lot where cable companies are owning teams that they should be able to monetize eyeballs better than anybody. Is that not you brought up the Red Sox, their success, the Yankees, their success, they own the network, do they not?
The Yankees are in the biggest media market with the probably the best brand in Kansas City. The Royals, this is 20 years ago, they tried to launch their own network and it didn't work. It didn't go anywhere. The Twins in Minnesota, they tried. Again, that was 2 decades ago. Also 2 decades ago, News Corp owned the Dodgers, and because they thought the same way and they could not make it work, and they weren't used to being the way the fans vilify GMs, especially when things don't go well, or owners when things don't go well. And News Corp at the time wasn't used to being vilified like that. It was like, wait, we're just trying to own a team, and so that didn't necessarily work out that well. But the interesting thing about cable, eventually it's going to go away. Like when is that necessarily going to happen? Because right now, one of the advantages to cable is that you pay one price and everything comes through that pipe. So I pay for my cable, and I don't need to worry about where any other games are, because just about everything comes into cable. And I think what all of the networks right now are really taking a look at is cord cutting has hit the cable industry terribly hard. And I always get yelled at by cable folks because they say it's not cord cutting, it's sort of cord moving, because they're going from cable to something else to pay for. And so it's gone from that 100 million homes, it's probably in around like 70 million now. And how far will that drop? I mean, because there's an absolute belief that it will plateau at some point. And the question is just when that happens. And if it plateaus down around 30 or 40 million, then all those networks are in deep trouble. If it plateaus around 50 or 60 million, you can make a nice business out of that.
Part of the problem is that our kids aren't cord cutters, they're cord nevers.
Nevers, yes.
And our kids are never paying for cable. They're just not.
So what happens when our kids get married and have kids, and does cable all of a sudden become something that, because we're speaking about our kids in their early 20s, which they're not paying for anything, but at some point when they become more established, they have more of a discretionary income, and they need some entertainment for kids, the electronic entertainment. Do they start to do that?
No, they're paying for gigabyte or whatever it is then internet, and they're paying for their streaming services. And for sports, they're buying their packages.
Mm.
Right? Like, what else do they need?
Yeah. And the question is how you get there.
Correct.
Yeah.
The best internet connectivity you can for the best speed. I mean, I think that's the answer. I mean, that to me is where, I think T-Mobile was so smart originally offering, free Netflix with their top tier. Like, that was brilliant, because that ultimately, that's where it's going to be. How are you going to get loyalty? Who's going to give me the most bang for that buck to get me to switch? Because right now it's so ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
But it is fascinating because we seem to have so many issues, and yet audience numbers appear to be pretty good. Like, you read the reports, and the NBA draft numbers were good. The NHL draft, which is shocking, were actually pretty good. Playoff numbers seem to be good. Super Bowl numbers were good.
It's
and
because
yet
the people that are cutting the cord are not hardcore. They're not sports fans. They're my wife would have cut the cord years ago because she doesn't like sports.
Right.
But I do, and I like, so we're not cutting it. So
Correct.
and so you're seeing viewership for sports events, especially big sports events, really maintain pretty good levels. If you look at entertainment programming ratings, those couldn't be lower. And in fact, at Sports Business Journal, every year we come up with a list of top 100 shows on television. And sports, when we started this list, about 2 decades ago, sports took up about 70 slots in the top 100. Now it's well over 90. I mean, and the only other ones that aren't there are usually like a State of the Union address,
Right.
or the Oscars, or some other like live event. You're not seeing like a match finale.
Right.
I am showing my age here. I apologize. You're not seeing an entertainment program sort of get in on that.
So on my drive home from the airport at 5:00 this morning, I was listening to Professor Galloway and Kara Swisher on the Pivot Pod, and they were talking about a bunch of different people getting crushed, especially Elon Musk. What a surprise. And Galloway made an interesting comment, made me think of you in our discussion this morning. He said, Bob Iger let go a ton of beloved ESPN sportscasters recently, and no one really went hard after Iger because Iger isn't out there, parading around and, in like a Lamborghini. He's not showing up, flaunting himself at the Four Seasons on a beach. Like, nobody really knows what he does. He kind of has this quiet persona. He does his job. People tend to respect him. Do you agree with that comment?
No, I think he's gotten some grief for it. ESPN since 2015 has had, every 2 years they've had layoffs. And
I prefer the term bloodletting, but go ahead.
Every 2 years they've had bloodlettings. It's almost become sort of like a strategy of sorts, about like, okay, how can we look good to Wall Street? Let's cull. And so I can understand why Professor Galloway said that, because Bob Iger is like, Studio Central Casting CEO. Like, he looks the part. He stays out of the limelight. He doesn't show up, like you say. He doesn't show up.
He's not showy.
He's not. Yeah. And he's not threatening to go into the octagon with Mark Zuckerberg or anything like that. He sort of maintains a certain level. So I understand why he would say that, but I just know, like, among people that work for ESPN and people in the business, it's like, all right, enough. Like, why is ESPN always, every 2 years, like clockwork? It's like, oh well, we just have to cull a little bit more. It's a strategy that I think he's been getting bashed more than I've seen him in the past with this most recent round.
They've let some big names go this time. Susie Colbert, I don't know yet. Like, I don't know. She's as big as they come at that shop. How, where does ESPN go from here?
Jeff Van Gundy, for my money,
he is the NBA.
Absolutely, the top NBA analyst. Um, here's what here's how I look at view it is that Susie Kolber, who I think is excellent, but I don't think she brings one subscriber or one ratings point to ESPN, and she's been there for a while. I don't know what her contract was. ESPN is taking a look at their way forward, and their way to success is with live games, and then whatever you put around the live games is sort of filler programming. So with the NBA coming up, you know, you want to make sure that you're in good financial position to go after the NBA when you know that Amazon and its deep pockets and Apple and its deep pockets and Google and their deep pockets also want to come in to get it, not to mention NBC Universal and Warner Brothers Discovery. So what I took away from who they let go, it's just sort of people that hosted shows that maybe got good ratings, maybe didn't, but they didn't necessarily cut through the clutter in a huge way. And they want to cull that in order to improve their financial place or financial prospects, so that they can move forward to get the rights that are going to, because if they keep Susie Kolber and don't get the NBA rights, they're going to suffer. And I'm not saying Susie's the one thing standing in the way of the rights.
I got it. So they're trying to clean up the books in order to justify what's going to be a ridiculous bill to get the NBA rights.
Because believe me, the NBA knows that the ESPN needs the NBA. I mean, all of these TV networks right now are because of cord cutting and because they're getting so much less revenue coming in. They have need to have rights. The NFL is need to have by all of them. For ESPN, college football is need to have. The NBA is certainly need to have. And then they have like to have rights. It'd be nice to have rights. And I think you take a look at Major League Soccer. That all of the TV networks passed on them. They ended up going to Apple. So where one of my big jobs is to figure out where that line is and what falls on the right side of the line and what falls on the other side of the line.
Is it full-blown ownership of media rights by tech giants? Is that the only path forward for the leagues?
Oh, I had such a great answer to that too, John. All right. I don't know, and that's the big question moving forward, because like these tech giants, Amazon and Apple, they have to make money off of these deals at some point. And so if you're a big league, do you take the money now under the hopes that eventually, like when, let's say the NBA goes to Apple, and let's say that helps to make the cord cutting happen to where Disney it can't afford an NBA package the next time it comes up. I don't think that's going to happen. But like, if you're a league, do you want to help support this media system where like the NBA rights and the NFL rights are the lifeblood of these companies? NBA rights and NFL rights, they're a pimple on Amazon. I don't think they're even a pimple on Apple. They're not as significant, but for a Disney company, like that makes their entire business. And so one of the main things that I'm looking at and we're reporting on moving forward is what happens with that, because like if you're Amazon, I know Amazon's going to go hard after the NBA. But how many people did they lay off? I think it was like 20,000 people. And then they're going to go and make this big purchase that they're not going to make money on it, at least not initially. It's a hard business strategy to follow right now for me.
But Amazon certainly doesn't care about what the effect would be on Disney-owned ESPN. Does Adam Silver? Does Adam Silver care?
I think, well, that's what I was suggesting. Adam might care because he might want to make sure that he keeps these companies that are in dire need of keeping his programming afloat and healthy. as opposed to sort of running after the shiny object that, you know, that they're not as important to.
And so is it probably a safe bet that we'll see a split baby?
With the NBA, almost certainly. I mean, if I was advising the NBA, and they have a ton of advisors over there, keep your prime events on broadcast TV, on ABC. You know, give ESPN a nice little package, and go sort of test the waters with an Amazon. You know, give Amazon like a, you know, I could see Amazon with the Thursday night package or something like that, or I could see, you know, Apple taking, you know, a package of like the Sunday afternoon game, or who knows. But almost certainly you're going to see that split, and almost certainly you're going to. So the one thing we sound really pessimistic about the TV market in the United States in 2034. I'm still going to be able to see almost every NFL game on traditional linear television. The National Hockey League, every single, I'm not sure if it's playoff game, but certainly Stanley Cup final game, I'm going to see on traditional linear television through like 2028. Same thing with some of these big college conferences, the SEC that has linear TV deals going to the middle of next decade. So what the trend that I'm seeing happening is that these leagues like the NBA are looking at a hybrid approach where you do have a streaming, because if streaming takes over, you need to have something there, but you still want to be on traditional linear television because that delivers the biggest audiences.
So this might be an unfair and therefore quick question. Do you have any feel at all as to what is next for the Canadian TV NHL deal?
I unfortunately don't, so it is going to be
Okay.
a totally quick question. But
Okay.
the Canadian, I mean, the NHL is so much more popular in Canada than it is in the United States, that I would be surprised, given their US deal, that if they totally went to streaming and got rid of I think they got rid of linear television. So my expectation, without knowing the market all too well, my expectation is that they're going to try to craft a package that gets their the games in front of the most people that they possibly can.
Right. Okay. What I keep hearing the term fast TV and sports. Is that something you're a big believer in as the next big thing?
No, I think people are dabbling in that. It's so fun. It's so funny. It could take off, I suppose. One of the real conundrums is when people talk about cord cutters and like, oh, well, they can watch, you know, the NBA finals because it's on free TV, right? Broadcast TV. Would you know, if you didn't have cable, would you know how to get ABC to watch the NBA finals? I wouldn't. I took the antenna off my roof like 30 years ago.
Right.
Like I would be stuck. I would certainly almost need to stream it of sorts. So this idea of broadcast and of fast TV, of like, oh, well, it's going to be on over the air channels, so they'll be able to, more people will be able to see them. Is
no fast. So fast TV is these channels that exist of old content. So it's like the Cheers channel that is 24/7, nothing but Cheers.
But it's broadcast, right? Or is it?
It's not like what the San Diego Chargers are doing. No, the San Diego baseball team is doing. Not over the air.
I thought the fast were within a broadcast stream, so I would need to subscribe to Fubo in order to
correct
to see them. Okay, right.
No, this is, you have to subscribe to Fubo, and then you could get, you know, the old ESPN Sports Center channel, and you're watching, you know, Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick from the 80s do their thing, right? Like, yeah, that's the question. Like, do you think that has legs?
No, I don't. Obviously, I don't know a ton about it because I messed up the question to start with. But the way you've described it is, you know, I mean, the way I use YouTube, right?
Right, exactly. That's it. That's exactly it.
Or TikTok, or, you know.
Correct. we're almost at the end here, and you've been very generous with your time. We talked a little bit about gambling, and an issue came up at the NBA draft where an athletic personality was tweeting about a draft pick, and some money started to move based on a draft pick that didn't come to fruition. Is this something that's going to become more problematic down the road?
How can it not? I mean, we've talked about, you and I have talked about our sons more on this podcast than I ever have before. So, but
that's good. I like the more personal effect here on the Pressrow. That's what we go for.
Well, at the Super Bowl last year, I was having a meal with Eric Shanks, who is the head of Fox Sports.
Okay.
And I let my son, who's a sports fan, know that I'm having this meal. And Fox Sports produced the Super Bowl last year. And my son immediately texted. He was like, "Get the script. Like, whatever you do, find out what happens." And it was a joke. He was joking about it. Of
course.
But if I'm the NFL, that's not a joke that I like. It's like that, and it's. I then went, and there are a ton of memes about the scripts, and players are making fun of it and having fun with it, and it's tough. Donahue, the referee for the NBA, was that really just a one-off there? I mean, we're seeing that the NFL is suspending people for betting on their own games, and their defense is that, oh, well, we bet on us to win. Like that was Pete Rose's defense for good, like decades ago. And so, and you have my friend Scott Van Pelt has his bad beats segment. Like, at what point is a bad beats of like, oh, that's bad luck, to like, whoa, that looks shady. It's what I find interesting about gambling is that all of these leagues tiptoed into it, and now they all seem to be diving into it, and we're starting to I don't think that they're ready for, not necessarily the repercussions, but they're not ready for people for their own to monitor their own players. And I don't think they were necessarily ready for the idea from my son that, like, okay, let's come up. We're going to have, the Joker and the Nuggets win this year. This will be great, because that's a good storyline. And I just think that long term, that's something that they really, really need to take a look at. But as they're getting less money from media rights, and as cord cutting is happening, this is ready-made revenue, and it's easy revenue to get. And you have all these companies that are trying to do it, and so they have to say no to all this money on the one hand, while sort of dealing with some of the bad. It's more than bad PR, but I can't come up with the word.
Yeah.
Bad PR on the other hand.
It's funny because you go back in time, and we grew up watching Jimmy the Greek, not the greatest name I know, on CBS Sunday, right? And that's back in the 80s that I remember. And he was talking about the betting lines then. So it's not like this just fell into their lap and, oh my God, what are we going to do? This isn't new, right? They had lots of time to deal with this. And yet the Donahue podcast, which you brought up, which I think is one of the best serial podcasts ever produced, and yet nobody talks about it. Like, even from his grave, Stern has managed to quash that sucker, that nobody really wants to talk about it. And it's incredible. You hear these NFL players saying, I was sitting in these meetings, I asked all these questions, I didn't really understand what the rules were. Like, that seems really suspicious to me.
And then you have the players that's sort of incredulous. Like, I can pick myself on a fantasy team that's worth $1,000, but I can't bet on myself to get over 75 yards rushing. Like, that doesn't make sense to them, and it makes sense to me. But it's
So, last question. I'll come back to my son. So he's studying media and communications at Boulder, and I tend to be optimistic, and I come back to how we started, and that is the appetite for consumption remains strong. despite what people are telling you and telling me that we're wrong, I completely disagree. And that is, there are people out, the same number of people want to watch, they want to listen, and they want to read. What on the devices that they're reading, the mediums that they're listening to or watching are changing, but that appetite remains strong. Who's going to give us hope to figure out the business model?
Well, that's a good question. I wasn't expecting that question, but look, when I graduated college, my first job in media was working for a weekly newspaper, which has since gone away. You want to talk old school? Then I took a job where I was writing for a daily publication that was faxed out to clients. Like, things change. Like the idea of you talked earlier, this idea of like these big long stories. Like I hate writing stories that are over like 500 or 700 words, because I know how I read online. It's you know, I get tired and I sort of go on. And so I look at people like your son, or that are graduating and know so much more about how to communicate with people, be it on, you know, like social media, or, I mean, look what we're doing. We're now doing a podcast. If you told me what a podcast was 10 years ago, you know, that like we'd be able to figure this out. So it's ever evolving. And I think as it evolves and you see old media try to change, or you see some old media just die and go away, you know, it's scary. Change is scary. But I know from personal experience that young kids still like sports. Like I said, go to any game. I brought up baseball, but football or basketball, go to any game. They're still watching sports. They're doing it differently. And if people can figure out how to communicate or how to reach those people, and if the leagues and teams can figure out a way to reach those types of people to get them to pay, or to get them to buy into it, that's what the future is. And I'm pretty bullish on that.
Well, unfortunately in Canada, nobody in the business, despite two massive media companies, have figured out the model. I remain convinced that they're going to copycat somebody in the States, or somebody in the States is going to come in. I remain bullish and optimistic that somebody, and there's smart people out there, and we've seen already, Threads came out this week, based on the Pivot podcast this morning. They're north of 50 million subscribers already. Mm-hmm. That's a staggering number. That's almost 2x the population of Canada have signed up already. The appetite for a vehicle to communicate is there. And I always said, and people thought I was nuts, that the NHL should have bought Twitter, because I thought that sports commentary on Twitter was the best for during games, trades, free agency, drafts. I remain very optimistic and very bullish that someone is out there. I thought it was going to be The Athletic. I loved that model when it first came out. Someone is going to figure this out, and you need to follow John on all of his different social media accounts, or on the Sports Business Journal. He's got excellent podcasts out there. I really appreciate you taking the time. He is the media guru. Thank you so much for taking time, and hoping that as major stories evolve, we can have you back to discuss them.
Anytime. Happy to do this. Thanks for the invite, Jonah.
All right. Take care.